2 days ago, somebody wrote me and said that they got afraid and they got scared and did a conference call with one of the coaches. And she was told what she needed to do, but she got empty. So she reacted like a victim, and instead of persisting in her vocal victimhood, just got really quiet. And her brain kind of froze. And so no matter what the coach said, she just kept saying yes, yes, as though she was understanding. Even though her thoughts were spinning like crazy and she wasn't hearing a word, and she was feeling judged. And then she wrote me and she said, after the call, I experienced a lot of self-judgment and criticism. And I was listening to one of your video chats, and something that I listened to in the video chat got me out of it. Somewhere during the chat, there was a talk about somebody who talked about finding the baseline of feeling loved. How if we feel loved enough, then feeling loved becomes our new normal. She then said that she saw this as an event to learn from, and that the coach was not the problem. Because, see, she was complaining that she was in victimhood and the coach wasn't noticing that she was in victimhood. This is an example of trusting. I talk about trusting all the time. Instead of blaming the coach, she just kept looking for an opportunity to learn and trusted that it was not the coach's fault, instead of trusting and blaming, and eventually learned the lesson that she needed to learn. This is a separate person. This person says, not nearly as organized as usual, said to me, I don't see the relevance of connecting to people, which is something that we've talked about, a lot. Instead, I work out problems in my head. And so I suggested that she go find a couch right while we were talking, and that she lie down, hold her cell phone in one hand and just lie down, and had her put her hand on her chest, and had her remember that I was right there with her, as I've been with her many times before. And she felt connected. She felt the difference because she was willing to do this exercise, and again, to trust. She went on. She said, I have a life to live. I can just be. I don't really know who I am. I depend on others to reflect back to me. Sometimes people really don't know who they are, and they need us to remind them of who they are just by giving them opportunities to connect with us and feel loved by us. As a result of her being willing to do this experiment in connecting, she was able to quiet down to the place where she lost her fear and was able to then just be. But until we connect with people, until we have a sense of grounding, very often just trying to be in our heads becomes an utterly futile task. Here's somebody who wrote and said, I have a lifetime of various addictions. And he listed them. He's got quite a list. He said, I feel like I just had a huge breakthrough and that I've let go of the pattern. I now see even more that real love and trusting what you're telling me is the only way I can live. It's a pretty great way to live. And in order to trust, what I look for is just two qualities. I look for whether they know what they're doing and whether there's any evidence that they'll hurt me. We don't need necessarily to look for somebody who's perfect at loving us, just that they wouldn't hurt us and that they know what they're doing. And that's what this person decided to trust in. And that's what I've trusted in all my life, is in people who have those two qualities. So this person continued after saying, I can see that real love and trusting is the only way to live. She said, this was immediately followed by a massive urge to cling to you. So she's talking to me. I had visions of getting on a plane and flying immediately to Georgia. I really felt compelled to see you. Clinging tends to be used as a negative word, but babies cling, and that's in a healthy way. So in this particular case, cling away. You haven't been able to cling in a healthy way for your entire life, so now you actually need the clinging. At this point, your clinging days are simply not over. Clinging becomes pathologic when you cling to a person who isn't healthy and who doesn't agree to it. Notice that I didn't say that it's pathologic clinging just because you're empty or afraid. That's kind of unavoidable. That's why we cling. Even when we cling in a healthy way, we tend to be empty and afraid. And we need to cling to somebody like a parent who can help us with our emptiness and fear. So we need to cling. Although sometimes it's possible, even when we're not empty and afraid, to just cling from joy. This healthy clinging can turn into unhealthy clinging if you don't trust what you're getting, because then you're not clinging for real love. You tend to be clinging for more imitation love, even if what you're getting is real love. And I've seen this on a great many occasions where people cling to somebody like a coach or a wise person who's giving them real love, but they keep manipulating for it, and so they turn it into imitation. So how do you tell the difference? You don't really have to, because you should be able to, ideally, rely on the wise man or coach that you're talking to help you know when healthy clinging turns into pathologic clinging. So on the whole, in the beginning when you're healing, just cling away. She continues, I feel like I have let go of my crutch, and I feel like I'm trusting you even more than ever. Trust comes in stages. We trust a little. We get confirmation for our trust because we've trusted and now we feel more loved. And then, wow, we want to trust more because of our loving experience. And then we trust some more, and then we get even better experiences. And so it spirals, in this case, upward. We tend to refer to spirals as downward, but they spiral upward too. She continues, I feel like a scared, needy little kid, and I want to run and jump into your lap. Being loved by you is what is setting me free. I now realize that I've been afraid of some business things, some money things, never had money as a kid. My mother stole from me. I was always worried about that. That's a lot of things to provoke fear, and it tends to provoke enough fears that the fear becomes then generalized to, well, just about everything. And that's common with a great number of us. I was talking to a woman who was here for a recent intervention, and she had been frightened in so many ways by her childhood that she'd become afraid of, well, everything. Driving, closed spaces, heights, germs, dirt, just went on and on. Doing anything outdoors. And after spending a couple of days with her, it was pretty obvious that as she felt loved, her generalized fear disappeared. So fear and pain add up. So as her generalized fear decreased, her fear of specific things decreased. And I said, would you like to prove that your fear of some specific things has decreased as your generalized fear has? She said, sure. Something she's always been afraid of is going fast or being outdoors in dirt and mud. And one time she'd been on the back of a all-terrain vehicle, a four-wheel drive vehicle. It scared her to death. So I said, then let's go out on a ride on an ATV. And she looked at me without a beat, without a pause, and said, okay, this is something that had previously frightened her. And we went crazy through muddy trails and through the woods, and at one point reached a river that was fairly deep, and she said, you're not going to go through that. Yeah, we are. We went right through it as deep as you can go without stalling an ATV out in the middle of a river. She had fun and laughed the whole time. Once we get to the place where we're afraid of everything, it just doesn't take much to push us over the edge. And once we feel loved enough, our generalized fear and our specific fears decrease. She continues, I don't feel afraid of the business decisions now or the IRS. I'm no longer scared about not having money. I'll just make the decisions I need to make. I feel like I have surrendered and trust that you love me and everything will be okay. This is another great example of what I was talking about. Once you feel loved and trusting and happy overall, your fear of lots of things goes away. In this case, money and investments and riding on an ATV or whatever. It's a pretty great feeling. Fear is death. And so the solution is not to deal with the individual fears. The solution is to feel loved enough that overall the fears just go away. I had an opening in my schedule, and I called somebody who had asked for time later in the day, so I called early. She was available. Had a lovely conversation, sweet, peaceful. So afterward, I emailed her that I needed the slot later in the day that had been scheduled for her. I needed it for someone else. And she responded in this way. She said, oh, that's fine. She said, I'm filled to overflowing and grateful to bursting. If I were to die in this moment, I'd accept death graciously, for I would have known what it's like to feel loved. That is trusting. When we're trusting, I mean, it's a little poetic, but when we trust, we just don't worry about anything. You tend not to worry about sickness, death, losing money, your kids, anything. When we trust, we enjoy what we have rather than obsessing about what we don't have, which is what we do when we're not trusting. Zoe's story. Zoe's 18 months old. And this is her mother writing. She said, last night I took her out on the streets of Manhattan where she pushed her little toy stroller around with her baby doll in it. Normally she's in the stroller, so she just loved the independence of pushing her stroller around. And she was just grinning and giggling like crazy. She was so excited that she started saying, happy, 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 while she was clapping her hands and making the little, these days, little kids learn sign language for things, food, milk, up, happy. And she was making little signs for happy. And her mother says, it occurred to me that this is a miracle. She said, I was just recently an intern for you at an intervention, and you spent a great deal of the time just teaching each member of the family what they were feeling from moment to moment, one moment to the next. I do that quite a bit. When people have not felt loved, the overwhelming feeling that they have is fear. And we just can't live with fear all the time. And so we've learned to just readjust our zero so that when we're baseline afraid, we just call it normal or okay. So when I ask people how they're doing, almost invariably they say, okay. No, you're not even close to okay. And so I often help people to identify how they feel, often by just providing words to see if they sound familiar or see if they sound true. And in some cases, when people have had no experience with feeling anything but afraid, less afraid, more afraid, pain, more afraid, less pain, if that's all people know, then sometimes they need to actually be told how they feel. That's a kind of a risky thing to do for a wise person or a coach to do, but after you've been doing it for a while, you kind of can just feel how people feel. Partly it's in their face, partly it's just a gut feeling. So I help people see that they're angry, safe, loved, happy, afraid, whatever. And it is astonishing how many people after 3, 4, 5, 6 decades of life cannot identify how they even feel. So if they don't know how they feel, what motivates them to change how they feel? Nothing. Nothing could. Zoe's mother continues, because she was talking about what a miracle it was that she got to watch people's feelings identified during an intervention and got to watch her daughter clapping and singing happy, happy, happy. She said, this was surprising to me that you had to tell people how they felt. I forgot that people in so much pain can't identify how they're feeling. And I'm thrilled that Zoe won't have to go through that. She's a year and a half old, and yet she can already identify her emotions and express them out loud. How cool is that? I mean, even when you took me on the ATV, this is 2 stories about an ATV and 1 video chat. This is the mother speaking. I had to consciously think of how much I was enjoying myself. In the past, I would never have exclaimed out loud how happy I was. But I did this time. It would never have occurred to me before. Most of us are really not living. It's like we're missing life. It's like we're in a coma. We've become so accustomed to pain and fear that it's all we know. So all we know is variations in those 2 conditions. But here's an 18-month-old child who can already identify happy, sad, not happy, loving, not. 18 months old. What a glorious advantage at that age. But the rest of us can learn it. Somebody said, what is the balance between an obsession with doing things right and just wanting not to be unproductive, not to make mistakes that hurt myself and others? Fear. Simple as that. If you're anxious, you lose. You'll do the wrong thing, even if it's technically the right thing to do. Because see, if you're afraid, every decision digs your hole deeper. If you're wrong while you're afraid, you'll feel worse about yourself. If you're right, you're still screwed because you just confirm your need to do things right in order to feel safe or worthwhile. Fear is how you tell the difference between just simply wanting to do things right and an obsession with being right. We have to live without fear. So with fear, you're screwed either way. So when making decisions, the first thing to do is to lose the fear. So, for example, somebody calls me and they say, I don't know whether to buy a house or to live in an apartment. This happened just the other day. I'm not a real estate guru. I don't know anything about whether you should live in a house or an apartment. Don't care for that matter, not even a little bit. But they were afraid. So I simply loved them. I had them go through some of the consequences of both. Renting a house, renting an apartment, buying a house. Just go through the things that they were concerned about and help them see how it wouldn't destroy their lives and help them to feel loved. And at the end of the conversation, poof, because they weren't afraid, they knew which one they wanted to do, even though I really never told them which to do. I had a man once call me who owns a cattle ranch, and he does everything from in vitro fertilization to breeding to raising them to calves to raising calves to full-grown cows. He has a major operation. And he had all kinds of fears about what he should do. And when we got done, he said, wow, you really know a lot about cattle ranching. I don't know anything about cattle ranching. I know where hamburgers come from. Steaks, sort of. They come from the cow. I don't really know where. I'm not sure if the cow actually has to die or they donate steaks. So I don't know anything about cattle ranching. But I helped him to feel unafraid. When he didn't feel afraid, he knew the right choice. We do it backward. We try to make a decision while we're afraid. We screw it up every time. It's about the fear. I know a woman who is very active in real love. She coaches people. She really works at this, helps run a group. She's really busy. Her husband, emotionally speaking, is kind of a lump. I don't say that in a negative way. He's just, he's a step below effusive. He's a step below even calm. He's kind of a lump. He's adorable. I love him. I really do. But he's not a bundle of energy. He doesn't initiate activities in his life or in real love. If you talk to him, you have to supply the energy and the words. Yeah, it's just a product of how he was raised, and he's not really all that willing or perhaps even capable of doing very much about it. Again, okay, so what? This is just a description. She finally realized that he wasn't fighting her, he wasn't trying to be difficult, but that he just doesn't have that kind of emotional energy. And she realized that she gave up trying to motivate him to be different because it just didn't work. She used to just nag him awful. Oh, she could be such a witch to this guy, just driving morning till night and telling him he was bad and telling him what he ought to do, and she'd be happier if only he'd whatever. But then she realized that wasn't working either, so she quit nagging. And she quit trying to help him be what she thought was a better person. It's just too difficult. Now she realizes, she calls me and says, I feel like I'm just using him. I mean, he's a companion. Occasionally we have sex. It's extra income. He's a father for our daughter. And she felt bad about this, that she would use him. And she went and told him that she was using him. And he said, to her surprise, though not to mine, he said, yeah, I know you are, and I'm okay with that. So she talked to me about her feeling bad about using him. I said, well, the choices really just aren't that many. First, you could live with the relationship as it is. Lots of advantages. Yeah, you'd be using him, but it's not contentious, and he agrees with it. Two, you could live in the relationship and fight him constantly to change, which you've already tried, and that doesn't work. You could leave and be single, but why? The way things are right now is pretty good, so why leave? Or you could leave and move on to another relationship. Now that's possible, but you know, the number of unconditionally loving guys out there is not huge. And now, in addition to finding a new partner, you have the consequences of divorce and child custody proceedings and all of that stuff that goes along with getting divorced and the complete risk of finding a loving relationship. So right now, what's she doing? She's choosing just to stay in it. It seems to work for them. It's not quite an equal partnership, but it's pretty impossible to find a relationship where the two partners are equal. What matters is whether it's equitable, whether it's satisfactory. So at least for now, this seems to work for them. I often talk about what a true partnership is. And sometimes people picture this perfect thing. Well, there are partnerships that still work, that are not equal or even necessarily ideal. I tell the story, I suppose, because there are a lot of people out there who are pushing their partners to be more perfect when that may simply not be possible. Here's somebody who writes, I'm disappointed and angry and having expectations. Never heard this before. I'm not getting what I want, which is to have a dialogue with two of my sons. I'm sort of chuckling here because I'm sure you realize already that you don't have a right to expect a dialogue with your children. Your children can choose to sulk and be angry for as long as they'd like, and you don't get to push them to do otherwise. You continue, since I've separated with their mother, they've stopped talking to me. I'm sure that they're hurt, angry, and doing the best they can, but I find myself still irritated that they won't be kind to me. Yeah, understandable that you would want your boys to be kind to you, but we forget as parents that our relationship with our kids is one way. It's our job to love them. And that's your job, to love them. Really not expect to have a dialogue with them at all where they understand you and accept you. You continue. Exacerbating my feelings is the next week's ski trip that I'm going to take with my friends. Months ago, they asked me if they could sleep on the floor, and I said, months ago, I said yes. They want to be my guests. In other words, they want to use me, but they don't even want to have a conversation with me about anything else. One of them has yet to even ask me about my recent separation from my wife. I feel used. I would like to let go and just love them, but I'm having a difficult time. Pay attention. You're going through a really difficult time. Divorce is difficult. It's painful no matter how you do it. Loss of companionship, loss of lifelong dreams, dealing with the judgments of others, which come in great crashing waves. So the real question is, do you need any unnecessary additional stress? Do you really want to go on a ski trip with people who appear not to genuinely care about you? Now, you don't have a right to demand that they care about you. You don't have a right to insist that a friend even ask you about your divorce or care about you in any way. But at a time like this, do you need the additional stress of having somebody like that around you who is at least pretending to care about you? If you don't want the additional stress, then cancel the thing. I mean, it's up to you. But again, you're going through a divorce. Everybody would understand you're canceling. I mean, if you call somebody and say, I've decided to cancel the ski trip, we're going through a divorce, who's going to say, well, buck up, I don't care. I need your floor to sleep on. They're not going to do that. Really, they're not. And if somebody would say that, well, then isn't it kind of obvious you wouldn't want them on your floor anyway? They may not like it, but they'll understand it. You don't need more stress. So eliminate this one, either by canceling the trip or at very least canceling their crashing on your floor, if that's an imposition. You just moved into an apartment and you don't have the same availability for accommodations as you did when you made the commitment months ago. Everybody would understand that. I mean, when you lived in a mansion, you said they could come and stay, and now you're homeless in a cardboard box. I think they get the difference. And we tend at this point to say, oh, well, as I've heard from many people, oh, but I can't do that to them, blah, 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 because I made a promise. Do what I call the hospital test. People ask me what to do all the time, all day long. And I tell them, I say, well, this would be a potentially wise course of action. Oh, well, I couldn't do that to people. They really need me. I couldn't not teach the Sunday school class. I couldn't not have the birthday party that I promised for my sister's, cousin's, brother's adopted dog, twice removed. Do the hospital test. If you were in the hospital, would you be saying, I can't do that to them? Or I can't cancel this or that? No. If you were in the hospital, would you be anguishing about not wanting to be used by your friends? No. And right now, you're in an emotional hospital. Really. At times like this is just too tough. And it doesn't have to be going through a divorce. There are many of us who get ourselves in a position where we're just emotionally drained and we need to be in a hospital. We must do whatever it takes to feel loved, peaceful, and not torn apart by fear right now. And if that's inconvenient for other people, well, too bad. Because if we're not healthy, we're not going to really bring joy into the life of other people. We've got to regain our sanity. A woman called me and she said, I'm struggling with how to just be. Now, do you see the immediate insanity of the phrasing? Struggling with being. That's like, I'm fighting to be serene. I'm screaming to be silent. It's wrong. Just being yourself, though, is perhaps one of the greatest accomplishments of life. I get afraid almost never. And the reason for that is, well, partly I feel loved and I enjoy loving other people, but even that stems from something possibly deeper. I know who I am. Now, that comes after feeling loved and practicing loving other people, but I know who I am and I know what I'm doing here. I know what my purpose in life is. So I don't have to prove it. I don't have to defend it or worry about it. I don't have to try to be me. In fact, that's almost a contradiction. I just am me. But the difference is I know who I am. I just already know. So from that, I can do almost anything because there's no fear or fear of discovering who I am, or fear that I won't discover who I am. There's no confusion. That is being, which is different from sitting in a lotus position and mumbling nonsense syllables. An example of being. Recent seminar, fairly early on in the seminar, I brought people up to the stage who were either paralyzed with fear or their hair was on fire because of fear. And as we talked, I just held them. This was, within the first, I guess, couple of hours of the seminar. And I held some people on a couch. Almost immediately, the two leaders of the seminar, we were at a large church, called me back to a special room. I felt like I was going to the principal's office. And they immediately said, "You can't do that." "To what?" "You can't hold people." It kind of looks like I can because I am. It's what I do. It's what I've been doing for years and years and years and never hid from anybody. And if anybody had looked into what I did, they'd have known that before I came here. And the leader said, "There are people here who are very upset about what you're doing, and we can't have that." And I thought, well, first, it's not people, because this happened within seconds of our starting to take the break. Turns out it was just one person. There wasn't time for it to be more than one person, and it turned out later it was just one, and there were 100 and something people present. And when I said it was just one person, they made no comment, which proved what I said. I said, I'm not here to make people comfortable. See, they were worried that there were people there who are uncomfortable. I'm here to help people out of the pit of their unhappy lives. And that's never comfortable. They went on at great length about how they weren't used to doing such a thing and telling me how I was wrong and how it was bad and how it looked. And I've heard this before. So at some point I just said, "So are you telling me to stop being myself? More blah, blah, blah. Well, now we just think you need to be careful." No. Are you telling me to stop being myself? Yes or no? More blah, blah, blah. I said, you have two choices. And this is how simple it gets when you know who you are. I said, number one, here are your two choices. There aren't three. So keep it simple in your head. I will continue as I have been, being me. Number two, and we'll continue the seminar. I will continue being me as I have been, and you can stop the seminar and close the doors. So you can live with me and like it, or at least endure it, or you can not live with me, but that's it, because I can only be me. Changing me isn't one of the choices. It turned out to be a spectacular experience. It was transformative for a great many people who were in attendance. But there was that still one unhappy person with his partner. Because I just stuck with being me. And I didn't worry about whether people would like it or whether they didn't like it. I was only too happy to stop the seminar. It's an example of what being means. Being isn't quietly sitting and meditating. It's being true to who you really know you are, not true to what you want. Often what we want is really kind of frivolous and transient. Being is an awareness of what is. It's an awareness of love, people, God, learning, who I am, how I fit into all that. It's very simple. We tend to be constantly moving on and looking for something else when we really haven't experienced the joy and the gratitude for now. Eventually there will be next steps, but not until we've mastered now. Being is a really powerful experience. And I recommend it. Listen to this again and you'll understand more about being, because there's a whole lot to it. I talked to a woman who has had an eating disorder all of her life. Binge eating with stress and then purging by various means, exercise, laxatives, whatever, lifelong. Also periodically anorexic. And she's been told all of her life by parents, friends, and others that her body was defective in a variety of ways. She's been told a million times that she was defective. And one day she said, I get spiritually high from these times of fasting where I don't eat, and then landing back on earth as I start to eat again. Has always been a bit rocky for me, feeling the heaviness of the food in my body and spirit. They test me to no end, so much some days that I wish I didn't have to eat. And then I get carried away by this fear of eating, and then the digestion woes return, and my belly sticks out, and I go really dark a bit for a day or two till I readjust. You can almost see the volcanoes in the background, can't you? And then I get loved around this, and I feel loved instead of this. But the crazy thoughts that my mind can be so cruel. She goes on and on for, about 3 pages of that. None of which made any more sense than that. Do you hear the crazy thinking here? The fear just radiates from her. Your issue, kid, around food has little or nothing to do with food. Deep down, you know that already. It's about the disgust that you witnessed as a child toward who you are, or anyone else who was judged as improperly shaped, not physically just right, not emotionally perfect, not smart enough, not dressed right, not whatever. So you learned to be disgusted around a lot of things, but a lot of that focused around your appearance, which is so definable. It's so visible. The appearance of you and the appearance of others. Many of these wounds you don't even remember because you were too young. But the message was, you are disgusting. You, not just your body. You as a person are disgusting. When I was a kid, whenever my father saw somebody who was overweight, he used to say things like, well, she looks like she's eaten her Wheaties twice this morning. And so we learned that how people looked was a reflection of how valuable they were as a person because of the tone of voice with which he said it. You try to control whatever you can so that you won't be disgusting. Control your behavior, control your thoughts, control your words, control what you eat, control how you exercise, control how you look, but it never ends. You're never done pleasing people, ever. You're never thin enough, ever. It's a kind of a common phrase among models, actually among many women. You can never be thin enough and never be rich enough. And you can never be pleasing enough. It just feeds itself. So you can never do anything happily, much less eat, which is why you go on just with crazy thoughts about this. This is not an eating disorder. It's an I'm disgusting disorder. You feel disgusting, not just your appearance, because you don't like yourself in lots of ways. And you've told me that before. You don't dress in front of a mirror. When you eat, you hear disgusting comments in your head. When you speak, you hear people laughing at you. So it's about everything about you. So you could address the eating disorder. You can go to, I lose track of the acronyms in 12-step programs, Overeaters Anonymous. You can go to these meetings forever. And until you feel sufficiently loved yourself, until you've learned to love other people, until you learn who you are, like we talked about earlier, it won't really matter what you do with your food, whether you eat it or throw it up. This writer says, my mother-in-law is atrocious at listening. So how do I deal with this when we're making plans? She said she wanted to see my young daughter, Rachel, and told me that she'd be free today, anytime after 11, and she would meet us anywhere. So I suggested that she meet us at our apartment at noon, which exactly fit into what she described. Then she said, well, no, that's going to be difficult. At noon, I have a meeting. Now, keep in mind, this is right after she has said that she would meet us anytime after 11. I get this every day from somebody. I mean, every day I get emails that say, I want to talk. And I say, so what would be a convenient time for you to talk, either today or the next day? And then they respond with something like, any time today. So I look at my calendar and I say, 3 o'clock. They write back, no, 3 o'clock's not good. And I'm thinking 3 o'clock would be one of the many times today after they've said any time today. I find this humorous by now because it happens so often. So what they expect me to do is to throw darts at a board of times while they say, yep, no, yep, no. It's lazy. And it's also very common. It's just information. It's not irritating. There's no irritation about this. But how do I respond? We're getting to that, which will give you a clue how you can respond to your mother-in-law. You continue. You say, we had to exchange several more emails before I could pull it out of her that what she really wanted was to meet us at our apartment at 2. That's what she'd wanted from the beginning. So it was a complete lie, wasn't it, on her part? Born from laziness to say anywhere and anytime after 11. Like I say, very common. Solution? Accept her. Don't fuss about it. Don't see her as difficult. Just accept that she's not going to change. Love her. So instead of negotiating endlessly, which becomes, I've learned in many cases, impossible. People will play that, no, not that time. Well, no, not that time. I don't have the time to negotiate with people. So she asked you for time. When people ask me for time, I don't negotiate. You might try this. Instead of negotiating, you simply state what you are willing to do. You say, my place, noon. Or we'll meet in the park sometime between noon and 12:15, and we'll stay there till 1. Then she will counter with another meeting time. So instead of negotiating, you just repeat your offer. It's a gift. It's not a negotiation. I offer people the gift of my time. They can accept it or reject it, but usually I don't negotiate about it. So you say, again, my apartment, anytime between whatever it is you choose, 11:30 and 1. And if she says that doesn't work, then you say, okay, well then maybe you could propose another day and we can come up with a time then. We don't have to dance around because other people are too either lazy or uncaring or irresponsible to be specific and thoughtful about their plans. I deal with this every single day. When people do this game playing with me, make it difficult, I don't get annoyed. Again, just information. If they keep being hard to contact, I just make it harder and harder for them to schedule and further away. Now, I do sometimes say to people, state some options that are available to you today, and then I'll pick one of those. But then they have to do the work because they wanted the time of proposing some possibilities rather than my having to dance around finding one. But if it becomes sufficiently difficult, then when they say, do you have a time today? And they've played this game repeatedly, I say, I have a time in 2016. I just make it far enough away. Now, why would I do that? When people make it difficult to schedule, they're saying that time with me, it could be time with you, really doesn't matter that much to them. If every time that I offer is inconvenient, then what are they saying? They have time for everything else that they do. Every other appointment is more important, and they just figure that I'll be flexible and I fall far down on their priority list. I don't mind. I really don't. But as I make appointments harder and more distant, people realize that appointments are more valuable. Not that I personally care to be more valuable. I don't care. They just realize that they can't order me up anytime they want, like, you know, a cheeseburger and fries for 10 cents. So now they have a choice. They can value meeting with me, either in person on the phone, or just do all those other things that are more important. See? Simple. I don't care either way. But why should I change my schedule over and over again for people who don't value my time? I do, but they don't have to. If they don't, I just don't make my time available. Really simple. And it's the same for you. If your mother-in-law doesn't value time with her grandchild, then let her experience the natural consequences of her values, which would be not having time with her grandchild. If she doesn't really mean what she says when she says anytime today, then why do you have to pay the price for the fact that she is self-deceived about what matters? It could sound harsh. It depends entirely on the attitude with which you do it. It's mostly just recognizing what people really value instead of what they say they value. Words alone really just don't mean that much. Here's somebody who says, I'm struggling with the faith needed to gain my happiness. I'm in a long-term relationship of 8 years. That is not what I want, but I feel torn about ending it. You could stop right there, or I could stop reading and I could finish the rest of this letter. Really. Just in those 2 sentences, we're not that complicated. You said, I'm struggling with faith. What are you saying? You're afraid. Struggle, fear. Struggling with faith, definitely fear, and almost certainly for a lifetime. Then you talked about being in a relationship. Now, those of you who are coaches and wise men, pay attention to how much you can learn from 2 sentences. So you described it as a relationship, not a marriage, so it's extremely unlikely that you're married and very unlikely that you're committed because you didn't say that. And the likelihood that you have children together is pretty much 0 in a relationship. You're torn about ending it. You're terrified of making mistakes, which makes you a mark. It means that you tend to settle for garbage in relationships because that's all you've ever had. You don't feel enough life or feel enough love in your relationship. You don't feel enough love in your life, and your relationship drains you every day with moments of okay or moments of excitement or sex or whatever, but that's where your relationship is. And that's all from 2 sentences. Just parenthetically, I was writing this back to the person who wrote it before I kept reading, and it turns out that all of this is true. It's not that difficult to interpret what people are really saying in a very short period of time. So now back to you, the writer. So this relationship is not what you want by your own account. And you've been working on it for, hang on, not 8 weeks, not 8 months, 8 years. And he's not budging. He's not learning. He's still selfish. You don't feel loved enough to be in a relationship at all yourself, and yet you describe yourself as torn. There's nothing to be torn about. This guy's screaming at you after 8 years that he doesn't really care about you, and you're staying for all the wrong reasons. Lonely, you don't want to hurt him, blah, blah, blah. There are a lot of them. But if you don't let go of what's holding you back, him, you can't move forward. I mean, this is kind of obvious physics. You don't let go, you can't move forward. You're in an ocean in a leaky lifeboat about to drown, but you're a few yards from land. You have to get out of the leaky lifeboat in order to step on the land. Most of us just sit in the boat and drown 20 yards from shore. You continue. People, my coach included, feel like leaving him is what I need to do to be happy, but I'm finding it hard to take action and leave the safety I'm wrapped up in. So notice, many people have recommended that leaving him's the smart thing to do. Your coach has recommended it, and yet you're still, in your words, torn. And you talk about the safety you're wrapped up in. The safety is a complete illusion, kid. If you don't take action long enough, eventually you won't be able to. You'll be paralyzed, and your life will have passed you by. I'm not exaggerating. I said to a lady the other day who was trying to decide whether she really wanted to live real love or not. Well, she's 48 years old. She's been in one awful relationship after another. And I said, honey, the day's going to come when you're 75 and you're going to wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and go, I think my life may have passed me by. She burst into tears and she said, I woke up from a dream days ago, and that's exactly what happened, even to the number of years. She said, I was 75 years old, looked in the mirror and went, my whole life has passed me by. Well, that's a pretty big clue, kid. You continue. Logically, I understand the pros versus the cons. It doesn't work like that, but we'll read them. I'm low on his list of priorities. He's never present for me. He doesn't work on the relationship when he's asked. His personal pain is so high that he can't focus on anything. He can't connect with me and isn't at all emotional. He's angry at the consequences of his choices, but he hates the reality of working through tough situations. He can't love me like I want to be loved. I'm struggling with believing that I deserve more. Those are the cons. So my question would be, what are the pros that could possibly outweigh those? You have occasional companionship and occasional feeling of being sexually desirable. You're sacrificing your life, no exaggeration, as though your head were on a chopping block. You're giving up your life for a few moments of being with somebody who's emotionally dead. Sheesh. You cannot have the relationship with him that you want and deserve. And if you stay in it, you will waste away and become so crippled you won't be able to have a relationship with anybody. Because with each passing year, you don't just get older, you get more crippled. You become less capable of change. You continue. I'm worried about hurting him. Let me help you with that. Hurting him. He arrived in your relationship already hurt from a lifetime of pain. Hurt a lot. Nearly dead, in fact. You've made very little difference in the pain in his life. And your leaving won't either. Yeah, it might hurt him for a minute, kind of like tearing a Band-Aid off a cancer wound. But somebody in this relationship has to get a life. And kid, you're it. He's not going to initiate change. So the question is, will you? Because this is life or death. You say, I'm scared to be alone. Oh, you won't be alone. You already said you have a coach. You have people in real love to support you. And now you're alone even when you're with him. It's an illusion that you're not alone, even when he's there. You continue. He makes me feel needed. So you sit as a nurse next to the bed of a dying man who refuses help, who you can't help, and you die in the process yourself. Pretty big sacrifice for no discernible benefit. There's only one way out of a burning plane. Jump. Could you be hurt? Yeah, it might hurt leaving this relationship. Just like if you jump from a plane, you might sprain an ankle when you jump with the parachute. But the alternative in a burning plane that's going down is certain death, which is true in your case, in this particular relationship. So, I would suggest you take it seriously and finally take the advice that you're getting from your coach and everybody else and get out. Get out. Learn to feel loved yourself. Learn to trust it. Change your life. Learn to become happy. Find out who you are, as we've talked about 2 or 3 times now in this one video chat. Learn to share love with friends in the real love community, and then eventually you'll be ready for an exclusive relationship with a partner. It's really worth taking all these steps. And I know a great many people who have, and the rewards are unspeakably great. Whereas the rewards, or in this case, the consequences of not taking action, are emotional and often physical death. We don't have to die. We don't have to have our hearts beating and have our souls dead. So find it, trust it, remember it, share it. The happiness is guaranteed. It's a law. We'll see you in a week. Thanks.